The restaurant buzzed with quiet sophistication. Crystal chandeliers reflected soft light over pristine white tablecloths. La Renaissance, Manhattan's most expensive dining spot, was a haven for the elite, until chaos erupted. 4 men in maintenance overalls stormed in, slamming the front door behind them. The elegant hum of conversation shattered. One of the intruders waved a gun, his voice cutting through the air like a knife. "Everyone stay where you are!" "Phones on the table, now." At a corner table, Victoria Ashford, CEO of Ashford Industries and one of the richest women in the country, froze mid-bite. A cold barrel pressed against her back. "Transfer 50 million now or we start shooting," hissed the scarred leader of the gang. But then something strange happened. Their eyes shifted across the room. A boy, no older than 15, sat calmly, chewing his hamburger, school uniform slightly wrinkled, backpack at his feet. The attackers froze, uncertain. There was something in his calm, an almost unnatural serenity. "Hey, kid," one of them shouted, pointing a gun at the boy's phone. "Are you deaf?" The boy slowly looked up. No fear, no panic, only quiet focus, as if chaos was just another Tuesday. "I'm listening," he said, wiping his mouth with a napkin, voice steady. The room seemed to hold its breath. Who was this boy, and why did his presence make the armed men hesitate? This wasn't just a robbery. Something far bigger was about to unfold. And the city had no idea a 15-year-old boy was about to change everything. La Renaissance was the kind of place that seemed untouched by the outside world. A sanctuary of luxury tucked away on a bustling Manhattan street. White marble floors gleamed under golden chandeliers, and the faint scent of truffle oil and aged wine hung in the air. Every table was meticulously set, silver cutlery aligned perfectly, wine glasses sparkling like crystal in the soft light. At a quiet corner table, Victoria Ashford sat alone. A plate of seared salmon before her, perfectly paired with a glass of vintage Bordeaux, she seemed untouchable. A woman accustomed to controlling empires and commanding respect. Her eyes flicked across the room occasionally, not from fear, but habit. CEOs, billionaires, and socialites often found themselves here, sharing space with the city's elite, protected by security that blended invisibly into the decor. But today, the elegance was about to shatter. The front door burst open with a force that sent a few patrons toppling backward. 4 men in maintenance overalls stormed in, eyes scanning the room, weapons ready. Their presence was jarring, tools and uniforms hiding intent as lethal as any trained assassin. They moved with a confidence that suggested they had done this before, but there was a tension in their posture, a flicker of hesitation in their eyes as they locked the door behind them. The murmur of conversation died instantly. Chairs scraped against marble, glasses rattled, and the quiet, sophisticated ambiance turned to chaos in an instant. Victoria's heartbeat accelerated, not from fear but calculation. Her mind raced, noting every exit, every possible weak point, and every patron's reaction. And then, amid the sudden storm of panic, there was a calm anomaly, a boy, no older than 15, sitting quietly at a table a few feet away. School uniform slightly wrinkled, a worn backpack at his feet. He chewed his meal with an almost casual air, eyes flicking subtly around the room. Nothing about him suggested alarm. For the intruders it was disorienting. Their eyes, sharp and threatening, lingered on him for a moment too long. Something about his calm gaze, so out of place, made them pause, if only for a fraction of a second. That tiny hesitation, invisible to the rest of the room, would soon become their greatest mistake. Amid the chaos of La Renaissance, one figure remained untouched by fear. Daniel Reeves, 15 years old, sat at a small table near the corner, his school uniform slightly rumpled and a worn backpack leaning against the chair leg. While the room erupted into panic, Daniel's movements were deliberate, almost ritualistic. He wiped his mouth with a napkin, adjusted his seat, and continued chewing his meal as though the gunfire and shouting were nothing more than background noise. At first glance, he appeared to be an ordinary teenager, quiet, polite, and seemingly unaware of the danger around him. But the second you looked closer, something was unmistakable. His eyes, dark and sharp, scanned the room with a focus that seemed far beyond his years. Every movement of the intruders, every slight shift in their posture was catalogued and processed in an instant. The boy wasn't afraid. He wasn't naive. He was calculating. The robbers, hardened men used to intimidation, froze momentarily. The scarred leader's voice faltered as he barked orders, sensing that this was no ordinary bystander. Daniel lifted his gaze slowly, deliberately meeting the man's eyes. There was no flinch, no hesitation, only an unsettling serenity, a quiet intelligence that made the seasoned criminal pause. "Are you deaf?" One of the men snapped, pointing a gun at Daniel's phone on the table. "I'm listening," Daniel replied, his voice calm, measured, and steady. A simple statement, yet it carried weight. The room seemed to shrink around him. Patrons whispered, glancing nervously, sensing something extraordinary in the way a teenage boy commanded presence without uttering a word. Even Victoria Ashford, seasoned billionaire and master of strategy, noticed it. There was something in Daniel's posture, the way he observed without moving, the subtle calculations hidden behind his calm exterior. He was ordinary in appearance, extraordinary in essence. In that moment, the audience couldn't help but ask, who was this boy, and why did his presence make trained criminals hesitate? This wasn't going to be a simple robbery. Something far bigger was unfolding, and Daniel Reeves was at the center of it. The scarred leader of the intruders turned sharply to Victoria Ashford, gun pressed tightly against her back. "Transfer the money now or we start shooting," he growled, his words slicing through the tense air of the restaurant. Patrons screamed, chairs clattered, and the polished serenity of La Renaissance descended into chaos. Yet Daniel Reeves remained calm, almost disturbingly so. His dark eyes scanned every angle of the room, the exits, the placement of each intruder, the reactions of the frightened diners. Nothing escaped his attention. Every detail, the angle of a gun, the tilt of a head, the faint glimmer of a security camera, was catalogued with precision. One of the robbers barked at him, pointing the gun directly at his phone. "Hey kid, pay attention! Are you deaf?" Daniel looked up slowly, his expression unflinching. "I'm listening," he said. A voice so calm, so composed, it was almost unnerving. For a split second, the men faltered, as if they had encountered an enemy they could not immediately intimidate. Victoria's hands trembled as she reached for her phone. Daniel's gaze flicked toward her, then back to the intruders. In the next instant, subtle signals passed between him and Victoria, silent language that only someone trained to read people could understand. He had noticed the silent alarm, the tiny, discreet gesture of the manager tapping his watch, and mentally started the countdown. "Approximately 4 minutes and 37 seconds before the police arrive," he thought. The leader sneered, assuming a cocky superiority. "You think you're smart, kid? You're just a suburban brat." Daniel's response was silent but lethal. He shifted slightly in his chair, observing, calculating. Every movement of the intruders was noted. Weak grips on weapons, unbalanced stances, predictable patterns. He was mapping the chaos, planning, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The atmosphere was electric, the tension palpable. Patrons ducked under tables. Silverware rattled. The smell of expensive wine mixed with fear. Yet Daniel's composure never wavered. It was this calm, this methodical patience in the midst of danger that set him apart. The audience could feel it, the suspense tightening like a coiled spring. Every second that ticked by heightened the anticipation, emphasizing the contrast between a teenage boy's serene mind and the panicked aggression of trained criminals. This wasn't just a robbery anymore. It was a battle of wits, and Daniel Reeves, the unassuming teen, was already 3 steps ahead. The countdown had begun, and every viewer watching knew one thing. The next move would change everything. Amid the tense chaos of La Renaissance, Daniel Reeves's mind drifted, not in panic, but in precise, disciplined memory. 3 months ago, his world had shifted irreversibly. General Marcus Reeves, Daniel's father, a decorated officer and the commander of the 5th Special Operations Division, had died under mysterious circumstances. Officially, it was a heart attack, but Daniel knew the truth. His father had uncovered a deep web of corruption, a scheme so vast it reached the highest levels of military contractors and shadowy corporate executives. The very people controlling billions of dollars had felt threatened by his investigations, and for that, he had paid with his life. Daniel remembered the lessons learned in their backyard, lessons that had seemed like a father's playful training at the time. Observe everything, son. Notice the exits, the environment, the weak points. Knowledge is the weapon that keeps you alive, his father would say, voice steady, eyes scanning the horizon as if danger was always nearby. He remembered late nights in the study, poring over maps, codes, and surveillance techniques. Every chess move his father taught him wasn't for play, it was preparation. For a world that could be cruel, violent, and unforgiving. Marcus Reeves had known he might not be there to protect his son forever. So he had left Daniel the ultimate gift: strategy, precision, and the discipline of a soldier. That discipline now guided every flicker of Daniel's eyes in the restaurant. Each calculation, the timing of the police response, the subtle cues from staff, the predictable hesitation of the intruders, was rooted in years of unseen, meticulous preparation. The boy the robbers saw was just the surface. Beneath it was a mind sharpened by tragedy, trained to anticipate every possible threat, and ready to act without hesitation. Victoria Ashford, the billionaire, had no idea that Daniel's calm demeanor was not just courage but the product of years of rigorous preparation. To the casual observer, he was a mere teenager, but behind those steady eyes was the legacy of a man who had dedicated his life to protecting others. And now, even in death, Marcus Reeves's teachings had become a formidable shield and a weapon in Daniel's hands. As the boy observed the chaos, the audience could feel the weight of the past pressing on him, not as fear, but as resolve. Every decision, every glance, every measured movement was fueled by a desire for justice, a drive to honor a father who had taught him that knowledge, patience, and loyalty were the ultimate power. The restaurant had become a stage of panic, but Daniel Reeves remained an island of calm in the storm. Every movement of the intruders, every tremor of fear from the patrons, was a note in the symphony he conducted silently. He had assessed the threats, noted the weaknesses, and now it was time to act. With the precision of someone trained far beyond his years, Daniel's foot flicked against the leg of the table in front of him. The table tipped, sending a plate flying directly into the scarred leader's face. The man screamed, momentarily blinded, his grip on the gun faltering. Patrons gasped, ducking instinctively, but Daniel remained seated, calm as a predator watching his prey stumble. He rose swiftly, timing each step perfectly, and grabbed a chair, hurling it toward the chandelier. Glass and crystal shattered in a shower of sparks and light, forcing the intruders to shield themselves. Chaos erupted, but Daniel's eyes were fixed on the openings he had already identified, the exit routes, the angles to manipulate, the enemy's predictable reactions. "Back door now," he shouted to Victoria, his voice calm but commanding. She didn't hesitate, moving toward safety as Daniel turned to face the nearest intruder. The man lunged, but Daniel's movements were fluid, trained, almost robotic in their efficiency. A precise block, a parry, a counterstrike to the pressure point in the attacker's arm. The man crumpled to the floor, groaning in pain. Daniel grabbed the fire extinguisher from the wall, spraying it directly into the eyes of another assailant. Foam covered the man, blinding him and making his footing uncertain. Daniel's calm, measured approach contrasted sharply with the robber's frantic aggression, creating a tension that gripped the audience. Every action was deliberate, every movement calculated to neutralize threats without unnecessary risk to himself or the hostages. The scarred leader staggered, wiping sauce and debris from his face, finally recognizing the terrifying truth. This was not a typical teenager. Daniel's upright posture, the precision of his strikes, the strategic use of the environment, every tactic screamed of extensive military training. "You picked the wrong restaurant," Daniel said quietly, almost politely. His words carried weight far beyond his years, and the wrong person to threaten. Within minutes, the chaos had shifted. Hostages were moving towards safety, intruders were disoriented, and the tactical advantage had shifted entirely to Daniel. The boy who had seemed so ordinary just moments ago had become the master of the situation. For the audience, this was the peak of suspense, the thrilling moment when intelligence, skill, and calm met raw danger, and the seemingly impossible turned into reality. Every viewer watching now could feel the tension, the skill, and the extraordinary competence of a 15-year-old boy who had just turned a near tragedy into a controlled, precise operation. Amid the chaos Daniel had created, a quieter, invisible battle was unfolding in his mind. While the robbers struggled with panic and confusion, Daniel's thoughts were precise, calculating every angle of the room, every second that ticked by. He was not just reacting, he was planning, orchestrating the next moves with the precision of a seasoned strategist. Victoria Ashford, shaken but alert, noticed subtle signals from Daniel. A blink, a glance at the chandelier, then a nod toward the fire extinguisher. Each silent gesture conveyed a command, a plan, without uttering a single word. It was a language of strategy, honed over years of training under his father, General Marcus Reeves, and it left no room for misinterpretation. Daniel had already noticed the silent alarm system, activated the moment the intruders forced their way inside. He knew exactly how much time they had before the police would arrive. Approximately 4 minutes and 37 seconds, he calculated internally. Every movement, every distraction he created was designed to maximize that window, buying time while keeping the hostages safe. The leader of the intruders, unaware of the calculations working against him, barked orders. Daniel anticipated each step. The predictable hesitation of a man under stress, the overconfidence of a scarred leader who underestimated a child, even the subtle cues from the restaurant staff signaling danger. He combined these observations into a tactical blueprint, mentally mapping escape routes, weak points, and opportunities for intervention. Victoria, back toward the kitchen now, Daniel signaled with a single raised eyebrow. She moved without question, trusting the boy's insight despite the chaos around them. Every instruction he gave was calculated to minimize risk, maintain control, and manipulate the environment to his advantage. For the audience, this was the cerebral side of heroism. The thrill wasn't just in the physical action, the flying chairs, the shattered chandelier, the sprayed fire extinguisher, but in the invisible intelligence behind it. Daniel was not only surviving, he was controlling the tempo, predicting the enemy's moves, and shaping outcomes before they even realized the danger. This sequence elevated suspense to a new level. The viewers understood that Daniel Reeves was more than a skilled fighter. He was a mind 3 steps ahead, blending observation, analysis, and strategy into a form of action that was as thrilling as any physical confrontation. Every glance, every nod, every silent calculation reinforced that in this battle, intelligence was the ultimate weapon. Once the immediate threat of the robbers was neutralized, a new confrontation began, less physical but infinitely more dangerous. Daniel Reeves stood across from Victoria Ashford, the billionaire whose empire was built on secrecy, manipulation, and greed. He no longer spoke with the calm curiosity of a teenager. His voice now carried the weight of intelligence, preparation, and moral certainty. "Miss Ashford," he began, eyes locked on hers, "your empire is built on lies, and your hands are stained with the blood of soldiers." Victoria's face paled, but she forced a calm exterior. "What are you talking about, boy?" she demanded. "You have no proof." Daniel opened his backpack with deliberate precision, retrieving a slim folder. Inside were documents, photographs, and digital records meticulously gathered over months. Private audits, correspondence, and evidence of DEFCON Industries' deliberate supply of defective military equipment, all pointing to the billionaire's corruption. Every detail had been carefully verified, cross-checked, and prepared for exposure. "I don't need the courts to prove it," Daniel said, voice steady. "A single leak, a single article shared with the right journalists, and the public will know the truth. Media scandal, investor panic, and federal investigation will follow. Your empire, built on deception, will crumble in 72 hours. Victoria's confidence wavered. She had spent decades building defenses, hiring the best lawyers, and shielding herself from accountability. But this boy, this seemingly ordinary teenager, had bypassed them all. She realized with growing horror that Daniel was not acting out of vengeance alone. He was executing a strategy honed by years of unseen preparation and military training. "You're a minor," she hissed. "Your evidence would be inadmissible in court. I could crush you legally, financially, and professionally." Daniel's expression did not falter. "Court is not my tool. Exposure is. Integrity, strategy, and loyal allies are stronger than money or connections." His words cut through the room like a blade. Victoria felt the weight of inevitability pressing down. Every attempt to intimidate, bribe, or silence him had already failed. She realized she was outmaneuvered. A 15-year-old boy, armed with the lessons of a fallen general and the loyalty of seasoned operatives, had turned the tables completely. For the audience, this was the climax of moral justice. The tension shifted from physical danger to ethical reckoning. Daniel wasn't just fighting criminals in the moment. He was confronting systemic corruption, holding a billionaire accountable with intelligence, courage, and unshakable precision. Every viewer could feel the stakes, the drama, and the satisfying justice being delivered not with chaos, but with calculated brilliance. The final moments of the ordeal were no longer about danger, but about justice being served. Victoria Ashford, once untouchable and feared, sat in a neutral office with Daniel Reeves across the table. The weight of the evidence she could no longer deny pressed down on her like a tidal wave. "Sign here," Daniel said calmly, sliding over the transfer documents. 51% of DEFCON shares to the General Reeves Fund. Public resignation from the board. Victoria hesitated, trembling, but the calculated look in Daniel's eyes left no room for defiance. This was not extortion. It was restitution. Every move she had made to manipulate, intimidate, or cover up her crimes had failed, and the consequences were now unavoidable. Daniel's team of loyal operatives and the meticulous evidence he had gathered ensured her compliance. Within hours, the billionaire's empire began to fracture, not through violence, but through exposure, accountability, and public scrutiny. Investors panicked, media headlines exploded, and the world watched as one of the most powerful figures in the country was brought to her knees by a 15-year-old boy armed only with intelligence, strategy, and moral courage. Daniel opened his laptop, revealing the investigative blog ready for publication. Photos, documents, and video evidence detailing the corruption at DEFCON Industries went live, reaching millions within hours. Victoria's attempts to discredit him backfired spectacularly. The public, captivated by the story of a young boy taking on a powerful billionaire, rallied behind Daniel. "Justice isn't about revenge," Daniel said, standing as Victoria signed the final papers. "It's about exposing the truth, protecting the innocent, and ensuring accountability." For the audience, this was the emotional payoff, the satisfying conclusion where intelligence and integrity triumphed over greed and corruption. The billionaire who had once seemed untouchable was now powerless, while Daniel's legacy, built on honor, strategy, and loyalty, became a symbol of hope and justice. As Victoria left the office, defeated and exposed, Daniel Reeves remained calm. The General Reeves Fund was established, funds directed to veterans' families, and the corrupt empire dismantled. The story closed with a powerful message. True strength does not come from money or connections, but from integrity, careful planning, and unwavering commitment to justice. And to the viewers watching, the lesson was clear. Even in a world dominated by power and wealth, intelligence, courage, and moral conviction could turn the tide. And sometimes, a single determined individual could change everything. Months passed, but the story of Daniel Reeves was far from over. The 15-year-old who had outsmarted a billionaire had grown not only in age, but in reputation. At 16, Daniel stood at the helm of the newly established General Reeves Fund, a billion-dollar foundation dedicated to investigating military corruption and supporting veterans' families. Every decision he made honored the lessons of his father, General Marcus Reeves, whose life and untimely death had set the stage for this remarkable journey. Daniel ensured that resources went to those who had been overlooked, forgotten, or exploited. Soldiers' equipment was upgraded, families supported, and corrupt executives held accountable, proof that justice, when guided by integrity, could have a lasting impact. Victoria Ashford, now serving her sentence, was a stark reminder of what happens when wealth and power are misused. Her downfall became a public example of accountability in a world where many believed the rich and connected could escape the consequences of their actions. Daniel, however, remained focused not on revenge, but on legacy. He visited his father's grave every week, leaving flowers and whispering, "We did it, Dad. Justice for you, for the soldiers, for the truth." His calm demeanor, combined with unwavering determination, inspired not only those around him, but millions online who followed the story of the boy who had become an instrument of justice. For the audience, this epilogue offered closure and inspiration. It was a reminder that courage, intelligence, and moral conviction could turn tragedy into hope, and that even in the face of overwhelming power, one person could create meaningful change. And for viewers watching this story unfold, the message was clear. Sometimes a 15-year-old with the right training, guidance, and heart can change the world. If Daniel's story moved you, inspired you, or made you rethink what's possible, Make sure to subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, and stay tuned for more stories where courage, strategy, and justice prevail. If this story of courage, strategy, and relentless pursuit of justice has inspired you, then don't let the lesson end here. Daniel Reeves, a 15-year-old boy with the right training, guidance, and unwavering determination, turned grief into action and tragedy into triumph. He showed that intelligence, integrity, and moral conviction can overcome even the most powerful adversaries. Stories like these remind us that heroes aren't always who we expect. They can come from the most unexpected places, and sometimes a single individual can change the course of events forever. If you want to see more stories where ordinary people achieve extraordinary feats, uncover secrets, and bring justice in ways that money and power can't control, make sure you subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, and join us for every thrilling story. Don't miss the next incredible tale of courage and strategy, because sometimes the most unlikely hero leaves the biggest impact.